I found my wife's bathing towel in the security guard's room, and her confession changed everything. My name is Johnson. I'm 57 years old. I built my house with the kind of patience men don't talk about. Years of waking up early, taking calls late, pushing through stress because you promised yourself you would give your family a better life. That morning, I saw something that made all those years feel like a joke. It was my wife's towel. Not a towel like hers. Not maybe the housekeeper moved it. Her towel. The one she always used after her morning shower. Same color. Same small tear near the edge. Same smell of her lotion that never fully washed out. It was hanging neatly on a chair inside the security man's room. I stood there for a few seconds and my body reacted before my mind caught up. Heart beating hard. Mouth dry. That cold feeling in the stomach that men recognize but don't like to admit. My first instinct was denial. You don't want to accuse your wife based on a towel. You don't want to become the paranoid man who destroys his own home with suspicion. You want a reasonable explanation. But the towel wasn't the real problem. The towel was the last piece. Because the second I saw it, my mind went straight back to the day I hired the security man. When I completed the house, I interviewed 2 candidates. The first man was quiet. Slim. Respectful. He spoke with a calm tone. He didn't try to impress anybody. Nancy took one look at him and shut it down. He's too ugly and too thin, she said in front of me like she was talking about a broken chair. This is a big house. We need a strong man. Someone that looks like real security. I remember feeling uncomfortable, but I brushed it off. I told myself she was just being protective. I even told myself she had good taste for standards. So I listened. I dismissed the first man and hired Paul instead. Paul was 33. Tall. Muscular. Confident. He shook my hand like he owned land. He looked like the kind of guy people would think twice before challenging. Nancy smiled at him a little too long. At the time, I noticed it. But I ignored it, because in marriage you learn to ignore small things to avoid unnecessary fights. You tell yourself, it's nothing. Don't embarrass your wife. Don't look insecure. That's how men trap themselves. We call it maturity when it's really fear of conflict. I walked away from the security room slowly, like my legs were carrying someone else's body. I went into the house and found Nancy in the kitchen. She was holding her phone, scrolling, pretending she wasn't bored with life. I didn't shout. I didn't accuse. I asked one question. Nancy, I said, why is your towel in Paul's room? Her eyes flicked up. Just for a second. Then back down. Which towel? She asked. I watched her carefully. At 57, you don't fall for cheap acting anymore. You've seen lies in business deals, in family politics, in friends who smile and gossip. And you learn something when someone asks you, which one? After you mention something very specific, it's not confusion. It's delay. It's time buying. The blue one, I said. The one you use every morning? She laughed, one of those short laughs that isn't laughter. It's defense. Johnson, you're standing there asking me about a towel? Are you okay? There it was. The move. Make you feel stupid for asking. Make you question yourself. I didn't move. I didn't smile. I didn't argue. Nancy, I repeated slower this time. Why is your towel in Paul's room? Her hand tightened around her phone. The screen went dark. She swallowed like there was something stuck in her throat. Then she did something I wasn't expecting. She froze completely. Not the fake calm. Not the angry confidence. Real freezing, like her brain went blank because she didn't prepare for this moment. And in that silence, I felt the truth settle on my shoulders like a weight. Not because I had evidence. Because I had her reaction. I nodded once, more to myself than to her. Okay, I said quietly. So it's like that. Her voice came out small. Johnson. I held up my hand. Don't start with my name like you've been respecting it, I said. Just answer the question. Nancy stared at me, eyes glossy now, and in that moment I realized something painful. She wasn't scared because she hurt me. She was scared because she got caught. She opened her mouth again, but no words came out. And that was when I heard the front gate open and close, someone coming in. Paul. I didn't even turn around, but my body felt it. The timing. The coincidence that isn't coincidence. Nancy whispered, almost begging. Please, not today. I looked at her and thought, so you've been managing days. Scheduling deception. Planning your peace. I stepped toward the sitting room, my voice low and flat. Call him, I said. Tell him to come inside. Nancy's eyes widened. Johnson, don't do this. But it was already done. Because the towel wasn't just cloth anymore. It was a message left behind by two people who thought I was too busy providing to notice what was happening inside my own house. And now Paul was walking closer, and I was about to look him in the face and decide what kind of man I would be after this moment. I sat on the edge of the couch like I was waiting for a meeting. That's what it felt like, one of those meetings where you already know the deal is bad, but you still need to hear the terms. Nancy stood near the hallway, arms folded, phone in her hand like it could save her. Call him, I said again. She shook her head quickly. No. Johnson, please. You're misunderstanding. I let out a slow breath. You're still doing it. Doing what? Trying to control the frame, I said. First you act confused. Then you laugh. Then you say I'm misunderstanding. You haven't answered one simple question. Her face hardened. So what do you want me to say? That I dropped it there by mistake? Maybe the housekeeper. Stop, I cut in. I'm not 20. I'm not even 40. Don't insult me with lazy lies. There was a pause. Then she changed tactics. Another familiar move. So you don't trust me anymore? She asked, voice rising. After everything? After being your wife for all these years? That's what you're doing because of a towel. I stared at her, and I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was predictable. Men watching from outside think cheating starts with sex. It doesn't. It starts with disrespect. It starts with the assumption that you'll be too tired, too proud, too invested to challenge anything. Nancy, I said, don't twist this into a loyalty speech. If you were innocent, you'd be angry and clear. You'd say, Johnson, I don't know how that towel got there, but we will find out. Instead, you're trying to make me feel guilty for noticing. Her lips parted, but I didn't give her room. And let's not pretend you didn't choose him, I added. You picked Paul. You rejected the first guy. She flinched at that. I leaned forward. Why were you so invested in the security guard's body type? Why did it matter that the man was too ugly and too thin? Nancy's eyes darted away. I was thinking about safety. Safety, I repeated. So for safety you needed a tall, muscular, confident man. And for 6 months you've been giving that man special attention in my house. You're assuming. I'm connecting patterns, I corrected. There's a difference. The front door opened again, slowly, like someone was unsure whether to step fully into the house. Then Paul's voice came from the entrance. Sir, you called? I looked up. Paul stood there in his security uniform, posture straight, face neutral. But his eyes weren't neutral. They flicked quickly to Nancy, then back to me. A split-second check-in. That's all it took. I felt my jaw tighten. Come in, I said. Close the door. Paul hesitated. Is everything all right? Nancy jumped in fast. Johnson is just, he's upset. It's nothing. That word. Nothing. The same word people use when they're protecting a secret. I raised my hand toward Nancy without looking at her. Don't speak for me. Then I looked at Paul. Stand there. He stood by the door like a statue. I pointed toward the hallway. Paul, do you know what this is about? Paul blinked once. No, sir. I nodded slowly. Okay. I turned to Nancy. Tell him what we're discussing. Nancy's eyes went wide again. She swallowed. Her voice lowered. Johnson, please, not in front of him. I stared at her. So now you respect privacy. Paul shifted his weight slightly. Just slightly. But that small movement told me he was uncomfortable, not guilty in a dramatic way, but uncomfortable like a man watching his cover tear. I stood up. Paul, I said, walking past Nancy toward the hallway. Let's go to your room. Paul's face changed. Sir? I walked without waiting for agreement. Men like Paul understand authority. They also understand when a man's tone is no longer negotiable. As I approached his room, I saw the towel again, hanging there like proof that didn't need a witness. I turned and faced both of them, Nancy in the hallway, Paul near the door. I didn't raise my voice. I asked Paul directly, like I was asking about his duty schedule. Paul, I said, how does my wife's towel end up in your room? Paul's mouth opened, then closed. He glanced at Nancy again, this time longer. Nancy's eyes begged him silently. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't a mistake. It was coordination. Whatever answer came next would be a performance. Not truth. I felt something in me go cold, not anger. Not sadness. Clarity. Because when two people are united in deception, you're not dealing with a misunderstanding. You're dealing with a decision they made repeatedly while you were out working, trusting, and building. Paul finally spoke, voice tight. Sir? I can explain. And Nancy whispered at the same time, almost like a warning. Johnson, please. I looked at both of them and thought, this is the first time in months that I'm more important than their secret. I took one step closer to Paul. Explain, I said. Paul said, Sir? I can explain. The way people talk when they're about to disrespect you with a lie and hope you'll accept it to keep peace. I didn't respond. I just stared at him. Nancy was behind me in the hallway, quiet now. Not quiet because she felt remorse. Quiet because she knew the next sentence could destroy her position in this house. Paul cleared his throat. Madam, she sometimes comes to check if I'm doing my job. Like inspection. I blinked slowly. Inspection. Yes, sir. He continued, building confidence because he thought he found a safe story. Sometimes she comes to ask questions about the gate, the cameras, the dogs. We don't have dogs. I cut in. He froze. I let that hang for a second. Paul quickly adjusted. The lights. The perimeter lights. I nodded. And the towel? He hesitated. Maybe she used the bathroom here and forgot it. That's when I felt my blood rise. Not because the lie was clever. Because it was lazy. It assumed I was desperate enough to accept anything. I turned to Nancy. Did you inspect his room? She looked at Paul, then back at me. Johnson, you're acting like. I stepped toward her. Answer my question. Her voice got defensive. I check everything in this house. I'm your wife. I live here. So you walk into a 33-year-old man's room and leave your towel behind, I said. That's your explanation. She scoffed. You're twisting it. No, I said calm. I'm repeating it. Paul tried to soften his voice. Sir, honestly, it's nothing like. I cut him off with my hand. Don't honestly me. You're an employee in my house. Don't talk like you're my friend. Paul's jaw tightened, just a little. The respectful mask slipped for a second. Nancy noticed it too, and she jumped in fast, trying to protect him. Johnson, you're being unfair, she said. He's just working. You're the one making it weird. There it was again, her instinct to defend him more than she defended our marriage. I stepped back and looked at both of them. Let me ask you something, I said. If I was the one whose towel was found in a female staff's room, what would you call it? Nancy's face shifted. She didn't answer. Paul looked down. I nodded. Exactly. I walked out of the security room and into the sitting room, forcing them to follow me. I needed space, not for drama, but for control. I wasn't going to argue in his small room like I was the intruder. This was my house. They stood in front of me like two children caught stealing. I pointed at Paul. "How long have you been working here?" "8 months, sir," he said. "And the towel has been in your room how many times?" I asked. Paul looked at Nancy again. That was his mistake. Because that look said, "Help me." Nancy snapped. "Paul, stop looking at me like that." Too late. I leaned forward. "So it's been more than once." Paul's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Nancy's breathing got faster. "Johnson, you're making assumptions." I sat down slowly. "No. I'm watching behavior. Both of you keep reacting instead of answering." Then I said the one thing that forced the truth closer to the surface. "I want your phone." Nancy frowned. "My phone?" "Yes," I said. "Unlock it and hand it to me." Her face changed immediately, like I just pointed a gun at her reputation. "No," she said quickly. "That's private." I nodded because I expected that. "I'm your husband," I said. "But privacy is more important than clearing your name." "It's not like that," she snapped, voice rising. "You can't just demand my phone because you saw a towel." I stared at her. "Nancy, if you're innocent, you would throw your phone at me to prove it." Paul shifted his feet again. I looked at him. "And you," I said. "Give me your phone too." Paul's eyes widened. "Sir, my phone." "No," I said. He didn't move. Nancy stepped forward fast. "Johnson, you can't do that. He's not your child." I leaned back and let the silence breathe. That was all I needed. Because in that moment, I saw the real structure of what was happening. Nancy wasn't just cheating. She was managing power inside my home, deciding who deserved protection, who deserved access, and who could be treated like a fool. I stood up. "Both of you," I said, voice flat. "Sit down." They hesitated. "Sit," I repeated. They sat. And I asked Nancy one final time, quietly. "Before you lie again, do you want to tell me the truth while you still have a small chance of dignity?" Nancy's eyes filled with tears. But I didn't feel relief. Because I knew tears don't always mean regret. Sometimes they mean the story is about to change. Nancy stared at the floor for a long moment, like she was searching for a way to confess without fully admitting what it meant. Then she said, "Johnson, it's not what you think." I nodded slowly. "That line is always the beginning of the truth." Paul kept his eyes forward, jaw tight. He was quiet now because the lie failed and he didn't know what role to play next. Nancy wiped her face with her fingers. "I didn't plan for any of this." I leaned in. "So it happened by accident for 6 months?" Her face tightened again. "You don't understand how lonely I've been." That sentence irritated me more than the towel. Because it was a move. A shift. Turned the betrayal into a complaint about my performance as a man. I stayed calm. "I want facts, Nancy. Not feelings. If you want to talk about loneliness, we can do that after you tell me what you did." She inhaled sharply and finally spoke in plain language. "It started around June," she said. "You were always leaving early. Coming back late. Always on calls. Always tired." Paul's eyes flicked to her again. She was about to mention him, and he didn't like hearing it out loud. Nancy continued. "At first it was just talking. He was always around. He listened." I asked. "So your husband provided the house, and the security man provided listening. That's the trade?" Nancy flinched. "Stop saying it like that." "That's exactly what it is," I replied. She swallowed and forced the next part out. "One day I went outside at night to check the generator area. The power had gone off. I was upset. He came around and helped. He was kind." I looked at Paul. "Were you kind because it was your job, or because you wanted my wife?" Paul's lips moved, but he said nothing. Nancy kept going, voice shaking but not broken. "After that, we started talking more. Then, it became texting." I asked. And you deleted the messages. She froze again. I nodded. That's why you won't hand over your phone, Nancy whispered. Johnson, please. I didn't raise my voice. Continue. Her shoulders dropped. Then one day, it crossed the line. I asked, Where? She hesitated. I repeated, Where, Nancy? Her voice came out small. His room. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I just absorbed it, because reacting would give them something to use against me later. In this house, I said. In my compound. She started crying harder now. I'm sorry. I watched her carefully. Sorry you did it, or sorry I found out? She didn't answer. I turned to Paul. How long? Paul finally spoke, low and guarded. Madam said she was unhappy. I laughed once, short and bitter. So you became the solution. He lifted his chin slightly. Sir, I didn't force her. I stood up slowly and walked toward him until he had to look up at me. No, I said calmly. You didn't force her. You just accepted access to another man's wife inside the house that man built. Paul looked away. I turned back to Nancy. How many times? She shook her head like she didn't want to count. How many times? I repeated. She whispered. I don't know. I nodded. You know. You just don't want to say it because numbers make things real. Nancy broke down, voice trembling. Johnson, I was lonely. You stopped seeing me. You stopped. I raised my hand. Don't. She continued anyway, desperate now. You stopped touching me. You stopped taking me out. You treated me like furniture. I felt invisible. I stared at her. So you made yourself visible to a man on payroll. Her face twisted. You don't get it. I get it, I said quietly. You wanted attention. But instead of talking to me like a wife, you treated me like an enemy you could outsmart. Paul stood up suddenly, like he wanted to end the humiliation. Sir, this is between you and Madam. I turned my head slowly toward him. Oh? I said. So now you remember boundaries. Paul looked tense. Nancy reached out like she wanted to calm him, then stopped herself, realizing how that would look. I took a step back and addressed both of them. Here's what you don't understand, I said. Cheating is bad. But the real damage is the disrespect. The planning. The comfort you both had doing this under my roof. Nancy cried. I didn't mean to hurt you. I nodded. But you did it anyway. Then I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I'm calling my lawyer, I said. Nancy's head snapped up. Johnson, wait. Paul's eyes widened. I stared at them, voice cold. You had 6 months to think, I said. I'm taking 1 day. And as my lawyer's number started ringing, Nancy rushed forward and grabbed my arm like she could physically stop consequence. Please, she begged. We can fix this. I looked down at her hand on my arm, and I realized she still thought this was negotiable. That was her final mistake. My lawyer didn't pick up the first time. That silence on the line did something to the room. Nancy noticed it immediately. Her panic shifted into calculation. She released my arm and changed her posture, sitting down slowly like a woman ready to negotiate instead of beg. Johnson, she said softly, let's not make decisions when emotions are high. I almost smiled. That sentence right there, that's when I knew she wasn't sorry in the way that mattered. She wasn't ashamed. She was afraid of losing position. 6 months, I said. That's not emotion. That's routine. Paul remained standing, arms stiff by his sides. He didn't speak anymore. Men like him know when the tide has turned. He was already thinking about survival, not loyalty. Nancy leaned forward. You're throwing away a marriage over one mistake. One pattern, I corrected. Repeated. She sighed dramatically. You've done things too, Johnson. Maybe not cheating, but neglect. Absence. Emotional abandonment. There it was. The scorecard. I sat down opposite her. So this is where we list my sins to balance yours. I'm saying marriage isn't perfect, she replied. People stumble. I looked her straight in the eyes. Stumbling is tripping once. You built a road. Her jaw tightened. You don't know what it's like being with a man who's always working. I know exactly what it's like, I said. Because I was working for us. She scoffed. You worked for your ego. For this house. For control. Paul shifted uncomfortably at the word. Control. I noticed. Nancy continued, more confident now. Paul made me feel seen. I nodded slowly. Because he had nothing to lose. That hit Paul harder than anything else I'd said. His shoulders dropped slightly. I turned toward him. You didn't invest years. You didn't build anything. You didn't risk reputation or legacy. You just showed up when I wasn't around and enjoyed the benefits. Paul opened his mouth. Sir? Stop, I said. This isn't your defense. You don't get one. Nancy snapped. Don't talk to him like that. I looked back at her. Listen to yourself. She paused, then softened again, switching masks. Johnson. I still love you. That word, love, felt hollow in her mouth. If you loved me, I said, you wouldn't have needed secrecy. You wouldn't have risked everything for attention. She reached for my hand. I pulled it back. Don't touch me, I said quietly. You lost access. Her eyes widened at that, not because it hurt emotionally, but because it was final. My phone buzzed. My lawyer was calling back. Nancy lunged for it instinctively. Please, just talk to me first. I answered the call and stood up, turning my back on both of them. Yeah, I said into the phone. It's Johnson. I need to file. Nancy's knees hit the couch. Johnson, don't do this. I listened as my lawyer spoke, nodding slowly. Yes. Adultery. Employee. On property. Paul cursed under his breath. I turned around mid-call and looked straight at him. Did you think there would be no consequences? I asked. He said nothing. Nancy cried openly now, but something inside me stayed still. The anger had passed. What was left was clarity. I ended the call. I'll send you details tomorrow, I told my lawyer. Nancy stood up fast. So that's it? You're done? I looked at her. You were done 6 months ago. You just didn't bother to tell me. She screamed then, not loud, but sharp. You think you're innocent? You think you won't regret this? I paused. I already regret trusting you, I said. Everything else will be easier. Paul grabbed his cap slowly, like a man preparing to leave a crime scene. Nancy turned toward him instinctively. That single movement, choosing him again without thinking, sealed it. Get out, I said to Paul. Tonight. He hesitated. Sir? No, I said. Nancy spun back to me. You can't fire him like this. I already did, I replied. Paul walked toward the door without another word. Nancy watched him go, and I saw something on her face that hurt more than the affair itself. Fear. Not of losing me. Of losing him. Paul left without packing anything. No argument. No apology. Just the sound of the gate closing behind him. Nancy stood frozen near the couch, staring at the door like she expected him to come back. I sat down slowly, feeling the weight of the house settle around me. Sit, I said. She hesitated, then obeyed. For a few seconds neither of us spoke. That silence was different. Not tension. Not anger. Judgment. You chose him, I said finally. She shook her head weakly. I chose myself. That's the same thing, I replied. You just don't want to admit who you became to do it. Her eyes filled again. I didn't plan for this. I nodded. But you maintained it, she whispered. What are you going to do? I looked at her carefully. I'm going to do the one thing you didn't expect. She waited. I'm not going to fight you, I said. I'm not going to argue. I'm not going to beg. I'm going to exit clean. Her face hardened. So you're just walking away? No, I said. I'm ending something that already died. She stood up abruptly. You're acting like you're better than me. I'm acting like a man who finally stopped lying to himself, I said. She crossed her arms. You'll regret this. You'll be alone. I looked at her. I was alone already. I just didn't know it. That hit her. I saw it land. She scoffed, trying to regain power. Men like you always think leaving solves everything. No, I replied. Men like me leave when staying makes us stupid. She paced the room. So what happens now? You throw me out? I shook my head. I'll follow the law. Nothing more. Nothing less. That uncertainty scared her more than shouting ever could. She stopped pacing. And Paul? I looked up slowly. If you ever mention his name to me again, this conversation ends. She pressed her lips together, angry now. You think he was the problem? No, I said. He was the symptom. I stood up and walked toward the stairs. Where are you going? She asked. To sleep, I replied. Alone. For the first time in months, without being lied to. She followed me halfway. Johnson, please. I turned back once. You made a choice in private, I said. I'm making mine in daylight. I went upstairs and closed the door behind me. As I lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, I didn't feel relief yet. Just emptiness. But emptiness is honest. Downstairs, I could hear Nancy moving around, opening drawers, making calls, managing damage. I realized then that tomorrow wouldn't be quiet. Tomorrow would be war, lawyers' stories, blame. And the person who controls the narrative often isn't the one telling the truth. I closed my eyes, knowing the next phase would test not my emotions, but my discipline. I didn't sleep. I lay there staring at the ceiling, replaying the last few months with new eyes. Every late meeting. Every sudden interest Nancy had in the compound. Every time she casually mentioned Paul's name like it was nothing. By morning, I wasn't tired. I was alert. That's what betrayal does, it flips a switch. I went downstairs early. Nancy was already awake, phone glued to her ear, whispering in the kitchen. The moment she saw me, she stepped outside. That told me everything. When she came back in, her tone was calm, too calm. Like someone who'd already started building a story. Good morning, she said. I nodded. You're up early. I couldn't sleep, she replied. I was thinking. I poured myself coffee. So was I. She sat across from me. Johnson, we need to be smart about this. There it was again, we? We? I repeated. Yes, she said quickly. People don't need to know our private issues. I looked at her over the rim of my cup. You didn't think about privacy when you were in Paul's room. She flinched, but recovered fast. I mean publicly. Friends. Family. This will turn ugly if we don't manage it. I nodded slowly. So you're worried about reputation. Our reputation, she corrected. I leaned back. Nancy, you stopped being part of our the moment you brought another man into this house. She crossed her legs. You don't need to ruin me. That word, ruin, was revealing. She didn't say, us. She didn't say, the marriage. She said me. I'm not trying to ruin you, I said. I'm trying to leave. She sighed. Men always say that. And women always say what you're saying now, I replied. Damage control. Her eyes hardened. So what do you want? Truth, I said. And silence. She laughed lightly. You don't get to demand silence. I do if I walk away without dragging your name, I said. But that depends on how you behave next. She leaned forward. Are you threatening me? I met her gaze. I'm informing you. She stood up abruptly. You think you're in control? I stayed seated. I think I finally stopped surrendering control. She paced again, then stopped. Paul is gone. Isn't that enough? No, I said. Because the issue wasn't Paul. It was you choosing him. She snapped. You're punishing me. I shook my head. I'm refusing to protect you from consequences. Her phone buzzed. She checked it quickly, then put it face down. I asked calmly, Is that him? She hesitated just a fraction of a second. No. I smiled slightly. You see? You're still lying. Her face reddened. I can't just erase 6 months. Exactly, I said. That's why we're done. She went quiet again, then changed direction completely. You know, she said, people will ask questions. They'll wonder why you suddenly divorced me. And when they do, they might hear things about you too. There it was. The implied threat. I nodded slowly. Now you're being honest. She crossed her arms. I'm just being realistic. I stood up and leaned toward her. Let me be very clear. If you lie about me, I won't stay silent. And you won't like how facts sound when they're not emotional. Her eyes searched my face, looking for weakness. She didn't find it. She swallowed. So you're really doing this? Yes, I said. Quietly or loudly? You decide. She looked away first. And in that moment, I understood something important. The most dangerous phase of betrayal isn't discovery. It's negotiation. Later that day, I went to my lawyer's office. I didn't bring drama. I brought facts. Timeline. Names. Employment records. Property ownership. When you deal with betrayal as a man, emotion helps you survive the moment, but structure is what protects you afterward. My lawyer listened carefully. You're sure you want divorce? Yes, I said. No counseling. No separation. He nodded. That will escalate things. I know, I replied. I'm prepared. On my way out, my phone buzzed again. A message from Nancy. We need to talk. I didn't respond. 10 minutes later, another message. Paul is gone. You won. I stopped walking. That message told me everything about how she saw this. Winning. Losing. I typed back one line. This isn't a competition. It's an ending. She replied almost immediately. You're acting like a stranger. I didn't answer. That evening I returned home. The house felt different, not empty, but neutral. Like it was waiting to see who would stay standing. Nancy was packing. Not fully. Just enough to send a signal. You don't have to leave yet, I said calmly. She laughed bitterly. So you can kick me out later? No, I said. Because leaving now is also strategy. She paused. You think everything I do is strategy. Not everything, I replied. Just the things that benefit you. She zipped a bag and turned to me. You're not as calm as you think you are. I nodded. You're right. I'm disciplined. She scoffed. Men like you always think discipline makes them invincible. No, I said. It makes us predictable, to ourselves. She sat on the bed. You'll miss me. I looked at her. I already miss the woman you pretended to be. That one hurt her. I could see it. She stood up and grabbed her bag. I'll be staying with my sister. I nodded. That's fine. She walked toward the door, then stopped. Johnson, what if I regret this? I thought about it. Regret doesn't rewind time, I said. It just teaches. She left. The door closed quietly. I stood there alone, not feeling victorious, just aligned. That night, I sat in the dark without turning on the TV. And for the first time in months, my thoughts weren't being manipulated. They were mine. But I knew something else too. Nancy wouldn't disappear quietly. People who lose control rarely do. 2 days after Nancy moved out, the calls started. Not from her. From people. Friends who hadn't checked on me in years. relatives who suddenly cared about my emotional state. Even one of my business associates asked, casually, "Are you okay at home?" That's when I knew the story had left the house. Nancy hadn't gone quiet. She'd gone first. That's another thing men learn late. Whoever speaks first controls the emotional framing. Truth becomes secondary. Feelings become currency. I didn't return any calls. I didn't correct anyone. I didn't defend myself. I let the noise build. That afternoon, my sister called. She doesn't exaggerate. She doesn't gossip. So when she said, "Johnson, what's going on?" I knew the version she heard wasn't clean. "She's telling people you emotionally abandoned her," my sister said. "That you pushed her away. That she made a mistake, but you're being cold and unforgiving." I closed my eyes for a second. "So she admitted the mistake?" I asked. "She said something happened," my sister replied. "But she's painting herself as desperate, not deceptive." Of course. I thanked my sister and ended the call. I sat there thinking about how carefully Nancy had chosen her words. Lonely. Neglected. Invisible. Words that make people sympathize without asking follow-up questions. She wasn't denying the affair. She was reframing it. That evening, Nancy called me directly. I let it ring twice before answering. "Johnson," she said softly, "people are asking questions." "I'm aware," I replied. "I didn't say anything bad about you," she said quickly. "I just told them we grew apart." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "You also told them I abandoned you." Silence. Then, "I didn't say that exactly." "That's how implication works," I said. "You let others finish the sentence for you." She sighed. "You're making this ugly." "No," I said calmly. "You're making it public." She snapped. "So what do you want me to do?" "Lie." I paused. "You didn't have a problem lying before." That landed. Her voice changed, sharper now. "You're trying to punish me." I leaned back. "No, Nancy. I'm letting consequences operate without interference." She laughed bitterly. "You think you're so mature. I think I'm done explaining myself to people who already chose a side," I replied. She went quiet, then said, "People will judge you." "I know," I said. "They always judge the man who walks away calmly." She exhaled slowly. "So you're just going to let me look like the victim?" I answered honestly. "For now." That angered her more than shouting ever could. "You're cruel," she said. "No," I replied. "I'm strategic." She hung up. That night, I realized something important. When a woman loses emotional leverage, she often switches to social leverage. Reputation. Sympathy. Narratives. And men who panic at that stage make mistakes. I wasn't going to be one of them. Because I knew the truth didn't need volume. It needed timing. I waited. Not because I was afraid, but because I understood something most men don't: reacting too fast helps liars adjust their story. Over the next week, Nancy escalated quietly. She posted vague messages online about choosing peace and being brave enough to leave situations that drain you. No names. No details. Just enough for people to assume. I said nothing. Then came the indirect messages from mutual friends. "You could have handled it better. She's really hurting. Marriage is about forgiveness." I thanked them politely and changed the subject. Privately, I documented everything. Messages. Timelines. Employment records showing Paul's schedule overlapping with my work hours. Screenshots sent anonymously to me by someone who didn't like how Nancy treated staff. I didn't rush. Because truth has weight, and weight needs patience to land properly. Then, one afternoon, I received a message from Paul. I stared at his name on my phone for a long time before opening it. "Sir, I need to talk. Please." I didn't respond immediately. I waited an hour. Then I replied with one line. "Say what you need to say." His message came quickly. "Madam is saying things." She's telling people I forced myself on her. That it was a mistake. That she was vulnerable. I closed my eyes. There it was. The final pivot. When sympathy fades, accountability gets reassigned. I typed slowly. Are you saying she's lying? He replied. Yes. She initiated most of it. She told me you didn't care anymore. She promised she'd protect me. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt confirmation. I asked, do you have proof? There was a long pause. Then messages. Voice notes. Photos. I stared at the screen. This was the moment where men ruin themselves, by celebrating too early, by exposing everything publicly, by turning truth into spectacle. I didn't do that. I replied, send nothing yet. He responded, confused. Why? Because once you reveal your hand, liars adapt. I typed back, because when you speak too soon, the truth loses impact. Paul didn't reply after that. I put my phone down and sat in silence. Nancy thought she was ahead because she was loud. Paul thought he was safe because he was quiet. Both of them misunderstood the most dangerous man in the room. The one who waits. Because waiting isn't weakness. It's positioning. And soon, the story would stop being emotional and start being factual. That's when everything changes. I didn't contact Paul again for 3 days. That wasn't accidental. When people are scared, silence forces them to talk, to others, to themselves, and eventually to you. Fear hates quiet. During those 3 days, Nancy's public tone changed. The peace posts stopped. The inspirational quotes disappeared. Instead, I started hearing sharper versions of her story through third parties. She said you were emotionally abusive. She said you controlled the money. She said she felt trapped. That's when I knew she was panicking. When a narrative shifts too fast, it means the original version isn't holding up. I finally replied to Paul. I'm listening. His response came instantly. She's asking me to stick to the story. She wants me to say it was a mistake. That I took advantage of her. I read that twice. Then I asked, and will you? A long pause. No, he replied. She's already distancing herself from me. I think she plans to sacrifice me. That was inevitable. Affairs aren't partnerships. They're temporary alliances. And when consequences arrive, someone gets pushed in front of them. I replied, send me everything. This time, I meant it. What came next wasn't dramatic. It was methodical. Screenshots of messages from Nancy, explicit, confident, initiating. Voice notes where she laughed, complained about me, planned meetups. Photos taken inside my compound. Dates. Times. None of it was emotional. All of it was precise. I didn't feel rage. I felt something colder. Resolution. That evening, Nancy called again. I answered. Johnson, she said quickly. People are starting to ask serious questions. Good, I replied. She went quiet. What does that mean? It means stories are colliding, I said. And yours isn't surviving impact. Her voice hardened. I don't know what Paul told you, but he's lying. I nodded. That's interesting, because his lies come with timestamps. She inhaled sharply. You're trying to destroy me. No, I said calmly. You're destroying yourself by adding new lies to old ones. She snapped. You think people will side with you? I don't need sides, I replied. I need accuracy. Her voice dropped. What do you want? There it was. I answered honestly. Nothing. The truth is already moving. She hung up without another word. And that's when I understood something crucial. Nancy wasn't afraid of losing me anymore. She was afraid of losing credibility. That fear makes people reckless. And reckless people expose themselves. The lawyer meeting was quiet. No raised voices. No emotional speeches. Just documents. I slid everything across the table. My lawyer reviewed the messages slowly, carefully. This changes things. I know, I said. This isn't a he said, she said situation anymore. He continued. This is documented misconduct involving an employee on marital property. I nodded. Proceed. He looked up. Are you prepared for backlash? Yes. And public fallout? Yes. What about reconciliation pressure? I didn't hesitate. There's nothing to reconcile. He leaned back. Then we moved forward. That afternoon, Nancy's sister called me. Johnson, she said cautiously. Nancy says you're trying to ruin her. I replied evenly. I'm responding to lies. There was a pause. She said Paul manipulated her. I have evidence that says otherwise, I said. And so will the court. Her sister exhaled. This is getting serious. It always was, I replied. Only now it's honest. By evening, the tone around Nancy shifted again. People stopped calling me to advise forgiveness. They started calling to ask questions. That's how you know the tide turned, not when people apologize, but when they stop assuming. Nancy texted me late that night. We need to talk. Privately. No lawyers. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I replied. That window closed when you made this public. She responded immediately. If you do this, there's no going back. I typed slowly. You already went somewhere I couldn't follow. No reply after that. I set my phone down and sat alone in the house, the same house where all of this started. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clear. Because I finally understood the lesson I wish someone had told me earlier. Trust isn't destroyed by one big betrayal. It's destroyed by many small permissions you give, to ignore instincts, to avoid conflict, to accept disrespect because it's inconvenient to confront. Tomorrow, the paperwork would move forward. Soon, the truth would be unavoidable. And when it surfaced fully, there would be no villains giving speeches. Just consequences standing quietly where excuses used to be. The divorce papers were filed on a Thursday morning. No ceremony. No announcement. Just documents submitted in a process set in motion that couldn't be reversed by emotion or nostalgia. Nancy didn't call that day. That alone told me she'd finally realized this wasn't a bluff. Instead, she did something else. She showed up. I was in the sitting room going through emails when the gate buzzer rang. I checked the camera screen and saw her standing there. No bags, no drama, just a controlled posture and a face she used when she wanted to appear reasonable. I opened the gate remotely and stayed seated. She walked in slowly, scanning the compound like she was measuring what she was about to lose. You didn't tell me you filed, she said, standing a few feet away. I didn't need to, I replied. You knew it was coming. She sat down without being invited. You're moving fast. I'm moving clearly, I said. She folded her hands together. Paul contacted you, didn't he? I didn't answer. That was answer enough. Her jaw tightened. So now you believe him? I believe evidence, I said. It doesn't need character references. She shook her head in disbelief. He's trying to save himself. I looked at her. So were you. Her voice rose slightly. You're letting a security guard rewrite my life? I leaned forward. You let a security guard enter your marriage. Don't act offended now. That landed harder than anything else I'd said. She looked away, then back at me, eyes sharper now. You know what hurts the most? I waited. You never fought for me, she said. Not even now. I nodded. Because fighting requires believing there's something left to protect. She laughed bitterly. So that's it? I'm disposable? No, I replied. You made yourself incompatible. She stood up abruptly. You think people will still respect you after this? I met her gaze. Respect isn't something you beg for. It's something you earn by how you exit. She walked closer, lowering her voice. You don't know what I gave up for you. I looked at her calmly. You gave up honesty. That's not a sacrifice. It's a choice. Her face hardened. The softness disappeared. Fine, she said. You want the truth? I didn't move. You already gave it to me. You just didn't think it would cost you. She stared at me for a long moment, then laughed quietly, no humor in it. You're cold, she said. No, I replied. I'm done negotiating with someone who keeps changing the terms. She walked toward the door, then stopped. One day, she said without turning around, you'll regret not forgiving me. I answered without hesitation. And one day, you'll understand why forgiveness without accountability is just self-betrayal. She left without another word. The gate closed behind her. And for the first time since this started, I felt something close to peace, not relief, not happiness. Finality. But peace never comes alone. It brings reflection. And reflection brings the hardest questions. That night, I sat alone longer than usual. Not to mourn the marriage, but to examine myself. Because if you walk away from betrayal without looking inward, you repeat patterns with different faces. I asked myself the uncomfortable questions men avoid. Why did I ignore my instincts? Why did I equate providing with leading? Why did I tolerate disrespect just to keep things smooth? The answers weren't flattering. I realized I had confused peace with avoidance. I thought being calm meant being wise. In reality, I had been passive where boundaries were required. Nancy didn't cheat because she was evil. She cheated because she learned, over time, that there were no immediate consequences for small disrespect. And small disrespect always escalates. That truth didn't excuse her. But it educated me. The next morning, my lawyer called. She's contesting certain terms, he said. She wants to reframe the narrative legally now. I nodded. Expected. She's also denying initiation. I know, I replied. And it won't hold. After the call, I sat quietly, thinking about how this would look to the outside world. A 57-year-old man divorcing his wife. An affair with a younger employee. A house that became a courtroom. People would judge. Some would secretly side with her. Some would silently respect me. Most would project their own fears onto my situation. And that was fine. Because I wasn't doing this for applause. I was doing it to restore alignment between what I knew and what I tolerated. Later that day, I received one final message from Paul. Sir, thank you for not reacting emotionally. I didn't expect that. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I replied, don't thank me. Learn from this. Choose better next time. He didn't respond. That chapter of my life, him, Nancy, the betrayal, was closing. But the consequences were still unfolding. Court dates. Asset discussions. Social fallout. The storm wasn't over. But the confusion was. And that's when I understood the real lesson of all this. Men don't lose their marriages because they trust. They lose them when they stop enforcing standards out of fear of conflict. Tomorrow would bring another test. Another decision. Another moment where discipline mattered more than emotion. And I intended to meet it clear-eyed. Court stripped the story of all drama. No tears mattered there. No loneliness speeches. No late-night confessions. Just timelines, evidence, and credibility. Nancy arrived dressed carefully, neutral colors, composed posture, the image of a woman who wanted to look reasonable instead of responsible. I noticed something immediately. She didn't look at me. Not once. That's another sign men should pay attention to. When someone avoids eye contact entirely, it's not shame, it's strategy. Eye contact humanizes. Distance protects the story they're telling. Her lawyer spoke first. He painted a familiar picture: emotional neglect, long work hours, a marriage that drifted apart, a moment of weakness, with an employee who misread vulnerability. I didn't react. I took notes. Because the most important rule in situations like this is simple. Never interrupt someone while they're committing to a lie. When it was my lawyer's turn, he didn't raise his voice. He didn't accuse. He presented facts. Messages with dates. Voice notes with tone and intent. Photos taken inside the compound. Employment logs showing access patterns. Her own words, confident, deliberate planning. No commentary. Just reality laid flat. I watched Nancy's posture change as each piece landed. First, her shoulders stiffened. Then her jaw tightened. Then she finally looked at me, just once. Not with anger. With calculation. She realized something important in that moment. This wasn't about who felt hurt anymore. It was about who looked believable. The judge asked a few direct questions. Nancy answered carefully, but the hesitation was there. Small pauses. Overthinking. Adjustments. Paul's evidence didn't make her look evil. It made her look intentional. That's worse. After the session, outside the courtroom, Nancy finally spoke to me directly. "This didn't have to be like this," she said. I replied calmly. "You made it like this when you tried to rewrite it." She shook her head. "You wanted to win." "No," I said. "I wanted closure without distortion." She scoffed. "You think this makes you strong?" I looked at her steadily. "No. It makes me honest." She turned and walked away, heels clicking sharply against the floor. I didn't follow. Because closure isn't chasing explanations from someone who already showed you who they are. That day, I felt something settle. Not satisfaction. Certainty. The divorce was finalized quietly. No celebration. No victory speech. Just a document confirming what had already ended long before the towel was found. Nancy got what the law allowed. I kept what I'd built. Neither of us walked away untouched. People eventually stopped calling. The gossip moved on to fresher stories. It always does. That's another hard truth men need to hear. The world reacts loudly at first, but it doesn't stay. What stays is what you live with afterward. I stayed in the house. Not because I was attached to it, but because running from a place doesn't heal anything. I needed to exist there without lies. Some mornings were quiet in a good way. Other mornings felt heavy. But heaviness is better than confusion. Confusion keeps you stuck. I thought about Nancy less as time passed, not because I forgave, but because I accepted. Accepted that people don't always betray you out of hatred. Sometimes they betray you because they think you won't leave. That's the mistake I won't repeat. I didn't rush into another relationship. I didn't try to replace anything. Instead, I rebuilt boundaries. I spoke up sooner. I questioned discomfort instead of burying it. I stopped confusing peace with silence. One evening, months later, I folded a towel fresh from the dryer. Blue. For a moment, the memory surfaced. Then it passed. Because objects only hold power when you refuse to process what they revealed. I placed the towel neatly where it belonged. And I realized something important. The towel didn't destroy my marriage. It exposed the truth I'd been avoiding. And losing a marriage built on blind trust is painful, but staying in one built on quiet disrespect is worse. I'm not bitter. I'm aware. And awareness, for a man who's learned the hard way, is a form of freedom that doesn't need applause. Time did what arguments couldn't. It quieted everything. Months passed. The house settled into a rhythm that didn't require emotional negotiation. No tension. No guessing. No waiting for someone else's mood to decide how the day would go. That's when the real lesson arrived, not during the betrayal, not during court, not during the divorce, but after everything went silent. I started noticing things about myself. How often I used to explain myself. How often I compromised to avoid discomfort. How often I ignored disrespect because confronting it felt exhausting. I used to think endurance made me strong. Now I understand something different. Endurance without boundaries is just slow self-erasure. I replayed the early signs I dismissed. The way Nancy spoke about the first security guard. The entitlement in her tone. The ease with which she disrespected someone she saw as beneath her. That wasn't about Paul. That was character. I ignored it because it wasn't aimed at me, yet. Men do that. We think if disrespect isn't directed at us, it doesn't count. We forget that how someone treats others is rehearsal for how they'll treat us when circumstances change. I also thought about how easily I let my role as provider replace my role as leader. I paid bills. I solved problems. I kept things running. But I didn't enforce standards. And standards aren't control, they're clarity. People behave better when expectations are clear and consequences are real. Nancy didn't wake up one day and decide to betray me. She learned gradually that there was room to do it. That truth was uncomfortable, but necessary. One afternoon, a younger man I mentor asked me a simple question. How do you know when it's time to leave? I didn't answer immediately. Then I said, when staying requires you to lie to yourself. That answer surprised even me. Because that's what this was about in the end, not the affair, not Paul, not the towel. It was about how long I was willing to deny what I already knew. I didn't become bitter. I became precise. I don't chase validation anymore. I don't confuse attention with respect. I don't stay where clarity is constantly delayed. Those lessons didn't come cheap. But they stayed. If you're hearing this story late at night, quietly, like I once would have, you're probably not here for drama. You're here because something feels off. And you're hoping it's nothing. I understand that hope. But understand this too. Your instincts don't scream. They whisper. And they repeat themselves until you listen. I didn't lose my marriage because of a towel. I lost it because I ignored patterns to protect comfort. I thought love meant trust without verification. I thought peace meant silence. I thought providing excused absence. I was wrong. Trust without accountability is naive. Silence without boundaries invites disrespect. And love without leadership creates confusion. None of this makes you heartless. It makes you aware. I don't hate Nancy. I don't wish her harm. I don't even replay the betrayal anymore. Because resentment keeps you tied to what already ended. What I took from it was sharper and more valuable. I learned that men don't need to control relationships. They need to lead themselves. That means speaking when something feels wrong, walking away when respect disappears, accepting short-term pain over long-term erosion, understanding that consequences teach more than forgiveness ever could. If you're still in something that's slowly draining you, ask yourself one question. What am I tolerating today that I'll regret excusing tomorrow? Because one day, something small will reveal everything. And when it does, you'll either freeze, or you'll choose yourself. I chose myself late. But I chose myself. And that choice gave me something no marriage ever did when it was built on denial. Peace without confusion. Freedom without guilt. And clarity that doesn't fade with time. That's the end of my story. Not because it's perfect, but because it's honest.